The crystal chandeliers threw light across 200 faces, all of them smiling at a lie. I sat frozen at table 6, my hands gripping the silk tablecloth so hard my knuckles went white. The Grand Bellevue Hotel had never looked more beautiful or felt more like a trap. Gold-trimmed plates gleamed under the soft glow, champagne bubbles rose in glasses that cost more than most people's monthly rent, and somewhere in the background, a string quartet played something romantic and utterly wrong for the moment. Gregory stood at the head table, his tuxedo pressed to perfection, his arm wrapped around her waist like she was a trophy he'd finally earned. Camille, his bride, his work wife, his replacement for my mother, who'd been dead less than a year. My chest tightened as he raised his glass. This was it. The toast. The moment where he'd pretend to be a decent human being, maybe mention my mother, maybe acknowledge the woman who'd loved him, supported him, died believing he was faithful. I leaned forward slightly, waiting. Tonight, Gregory began, his voice smooth as the expensive scotch in his glass, I stand here a better man than I was a year ago. A murmur of approval rippled through the crowd. I felt sick. I owe that to two incredible women, he continued, and for one stupid second, I thought he might actually do the right thing. One who helped me become who I am, and one who showed me what love truly means. I held my breath. Say her name. Say Mom's name. But he didn't turn to the empty space where her memory should have lived. He turned to Camille, his eyes gleaming with something that looked like victory. And to you, my partner, my confidant, my work wife for all those years. You were by my side when the world was against me. Here's to finally making it official. The room exploded in applause. Glasses clinked. Women dabbed at their eyes. Men nodded in approval. And me? My fork slipped from my hand and hit the porcelain plate with a crack that cut through the noise like a gunshot. Heads turned. Gregory's smile faltered for half a second before he recovered, raising his glass higher as if nothing had happened. But I saw it. That flicker of panic in his eyes. Good. He should be panicking. Hi viewers, kindly tell us where you're watching from and what time it is. Warm welcome to the family, enjoy the story. I stood up slowly, my chair scraping against the marble floor. The string quartet stopped playing. 200 pairs of eyes locked onto me, and I didn't care. Not anymore. Interesting toast, I said, my voice cutting through the silence like a blade. Especially since the first, Mrs. Hart died believing you were faithful. The gasps came in waves. Someone dropped a glass. Camille's painted smile cracked, her red lips parting in confusion. Gregory's face went from tan to pale in seconds. Evelyn, he started, his voice dropping to that familiar patronizing tone. Not here, kiddo. This isn't the time. No. I cut him off, taking a step toward the head table. My heels clicked against the floor, each step deliberate. Exactly here. Right now. In front of everyone who thinks you're such a great guy. I could feel my pulse in my throat, but my voice stayed steady. I hope this dinner tastes as expensive as it is. I hope every bite of caviar, every sip of champagne, every note from that quartet burns itself into your memory. Because I paid for it. Every single dollar. The room went dead silent. You could have heard a pin drop on that thick carpet. $9,000, I continued, my eyes locked on his. That's what this fairy tale cost. And you know what's funny? You promised you'd pay me back right after the ceremony. Just like you promised to pay back the loan for your fake government contract. Just like you promised my mother you'd take care of her. Camille's hand flew to her mouth. Several guests stood up, uncertain whether to intervene or run. Gregory's jaw clenched, his face turning red now, anger replacing the panic. You want to toast your work wife? I said, my voice rising. The woman who helped you cook the books? The one whose name is all over those fraudulent expense reports? Be my guest. But don't you dare stand there and pretend you're a good man. I picked up my clutch, turned on my heel, and walked toward the exit. Behind me, chaos erupted. Voices overlapped, questions flew, someone called my name. But I didn't stop, didn't look back. My hand hit the brass door handle, and I paused for just a second, long enough to call over my shoulder. "Oh, and Gregory? My lawyer will be in touch. Enjoy your honeymoon while you still can." Then I pushed through those doors and left him standing there, his perfect night crumbling like the house of cards it always was. The cool night air hit my face as I stepped outside, and for the first time in months, I could breathe. Behind me, through the hotel's tall windows, I could see the guests swarming Gregory's table, see Camille's face twisted in confusion, see the empire I was about to burn down still glittering under those crystal lights. My phone buzzed in my clutch. A text from my lawyer. "Got the documents ready. Just say the word." I smiled and typed back, "Send them." Because this was just the beginning of Gregory Hart's very long fall from grace. And I was going to enjoy every second of watching him crash. 8 years earlier, my mother wore a dress the color of champagne and laughed like she'd forgotten how. I stood in the corner of the charity gala, watching her dance with a man I'd never seen before, and something in my gut twisted. Not jealousy. Something darker. Something that whispered danger. Gregory Hart had walked into our lives like he owned the room. Maybe he did that night. His suit probably cost more than the venue rental. His watch caught the light every time he gestured, and when he smiled at my mother, she blushed like a teenager. I hadn't seen her blush in years. Not since Dad died. "Your mother's glowing," my assistant whispered, nudging me with her elbow. "When's the last time you saw her like that?" "Never." That was the answer. And that should have been my first warning. Gregory found me by the bar an hour later. Up close, he was even more polished. Silver hair swept back perfectly, cologne that probably had a French name I couldn't pronounce, and eyes that looked right through you like he was calculating your net worth. "You must be Evelyn," he said, extending his hand. His grip was firm. Too firm. "Your mother can't stop talking about you. The designer. The businesswoman. The daughter who made something of herself." I shook his hand and pulled back quickly. "And you are?" "Gregory Hart. Construction. Been in the business 30 years. He flagged down the bartender, ordered something expensive without looking at the menu. "Your mother tells me you organized this whole event. Impressive. Takes real skill to pull off something this smooth." The compliment felt rehearsed. But my mother appeared beside him, her hand sliding into his like it belonged there, and I swallowed my suspicion. "Isn't he wonderful?" she asked, her eyes bright. "We've been talking all night. Gregory's company is doing amazing work. Government contracts, commercial developments, the whole thing." "Mostly commercial," Gregory corrected smoothly. "Though we're looking into some federal projects. Big stuff. The kind that changes a company's trajectory, you know?" I didn't know. But I nodded anyway because my mother was happy, and that was supposed to be enough. They got married 6 months later. Small ceremony, just family and a few friends. Gregory insisted on paying for everything, which should have been nice. Should have been generous. But when I saw him pull my mother aside during the reception, saw him whisper something that made her face go serious, that twist in my gut came back. "Everything okay?" I asked her later when I caught her alone. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Of course, honey. Gregory just needs to handle some business expenses. Nothing to worry about." But I was worrying, because 3 months after the wedding, my mother mentioned refinancing the lake house. The house my father had bought. The house that was supposed to be her security, her retirement, her peace. "Gregory says it's a smart investment," she explained over coffee one Saturday. "The interest rates are good right now, and his company needs capital for expansion. Once the contracts come through, we'll pay it all back and more." "Mom," I said carefully, setting down my cup. "Are you sure about this? That house is yours. Dad worked his whole life." "I know what your father did," she snapped, and I flinched. She never snapped. "And I know what I'm doing. Gregory's not like your father. He's ambitious. He's building something. And he needs support, not doubt." I watched her leave that coffee shop, watched her walk back to the car where Gregory sat waiting, engine running. He waved at me through the window, all smiles. I didn't wave back. 6 months later, the lake house was refinanced. A year after that, Gregory started mentioning his need for capital again. But this time he came directly to me. "Evelyn," he said, settling into the chair across from my desk at the design firm. He'd shown up unannounced, which should have annoyed me but somehow didn't surprise me. "I'm going to be straight with you. I need help. Short term. Just to secure this government contract. It's a sure thing, but I need liquid capital to show good faith. $20,000. $20,000. My stomach dropped. "That's a lot of money, Gregory." "I know." He leaned forward, his expression sincere.
"Practiced.
"And I wouldn't ask if it wasn't important."
Your family now."
"And family helps family, right? Your mother would want you to support this. She believes in me. I hope you do too." There it was. The guilt trip wrapped in a smile. The implication that saying no meant betraying my mother. I looked at him, at his expensive suit and his confident posture, and I knew I was about to make a mistake. But I wrote the check anyway. "Short term," I said, handing it over. "You pay me back in 6 months, with interest." Gregory took the check, folded it carefully, and slipped it into his wallet. 6 months. "You have my word." He stood, adjusted his cufflinks, and headed for the door. Then he paused, looked back, and smiled. "You're a good daughter, Evelyn. Your mother's lucky. And so am I." He left. The check cleared 3 days later. And 6 months came and went without a single dollar returned. Every time I asked about it, Gregory had an excuse. The contract was delayed. Paperwork issues. Government bureaucracy. "You know how it is, kiddo. These things take time. But you'll get it back. With interest. I promise." Promises. Gregory's heart was full of them. And every single one was empty. My mother never asked about the money. Never brought it up. And when I tried to talk to her about it, about him, about the way he kept borrowing and never paying back, she'd change the subject or get defensive. "He's under a lot of stress," she'd say. "Building a business isn't easy. You, of all people, should understand that." I did understand. I understood that Gregory Hart was a con artist in an expensive suit. I understood that he'd charmed his way into our lives, into our bank accounts, into our trust. And I understood that my mother loved him too much to see it. But I saw it.
Clear as day.
And I was watching our family bleed money while Gregory smiled and called us lucky. Then one morning my phone rang at 6 a.m. Hospital. Stroke. Critical condition. My mother never woke up. And Gregory? He was right there at the funeral, tissues in hand, playing the grieving husband. People patted his back, told him how sorry they were, how strong he was being. I stood across from him at the cemetery, watching him dab at dry eyes, and I knew he'd killed her. Not with his hands, but with stress, with debt, with lies that piled up until her heart couldn't take it anymore. At the reception after the burial, Gregory found me in the hallway. "I know this is hard," he said quietly, "but we'll get through it. Together. We're still family." I looked at him, really looked at him, and saw nothing behind those eyes except calculation. "Sure," I said. "Family." He squeezed my shoulder and walked away. And I stood there, numb, wondering how long it would take before he showed his true colors. Turns out, less than a year. Because 10 months later, I opened the newspaper and saw his face. Smiling. Arm around a woman I recognized. Camille Donahue. His project manager. His work wife. The headline read, "Local businessman to wed in private ceremony." My hands shook so hard I tore the page. The newspaper article sat on my kitchen counter for 3 days. I'd walk past it, glance at Gregory's smug face, and feel my blood pressure spike. Private ceremony. Grand Bellevue Hotel. The same place where my mother's funeral reception had been held. The audacity was stunning. I called my lawyer on day 4. Not because I planned to do anything yet, but because I needed to know where I stood. Could I go after him for the money? Could I prove he'd manipulated my mother? Could I make him pay? "It's complicated," Marcus said, flipping through the documents I'd brought. Bank statements, loan papers, emails. "Your mother willingly refinanced the house. You willingly gave him the loan. Without evidence of fraud or coercion, it's just bad family business. Bad family business, I repeated, tasting the bitterness. He stole from us. I know, but legally, it's murky. Marcus leaned back in his chair. However, if you can prove his company was already failing when he took these loans, if you can show intent to defraud, then we have something.
Start digging.
Find the cracks. I started digging that night. Called old contacts in the construction industry. Asked casual questions about Gregory's company. How are things going? Any big projects coming up? The answers came back quiet but consistent. Gregory's business was struggling. Had been for years. The government contracts he'd bragged about? Most of them were bids that never closed. The expansions? Funded by borrowed money he couldn't pay back. My mother's refinanced house hadn't gone into growing a business. It had gone into keeping a sinking ship afloat for a few more months. And my $20,000? Probably paid for his wedding to Camille. I was still processing all of this when my phone rang 2 weeks before the wedding. Gregory's number flashed on the screen. I almost didn't answer. Evelyn, he said, his voice warm like we were old friends. How are you holding up? I know this year's been rough.
Rough.
He called destroying my family rough. What do you want, Gregory?
Direct.
I like that. He chuckled. Look, I've got a situation. The catering company for the wedding fell through last minute. Total disaster. And I'm in a bind financially because of some contract delays. I know it's a lot to ask, but…
No.
Just hear me out. It's $9,000 for the full package. Catering, wine, band. Everything. I'll pay you back right after the wedding. First week of the honeymoon, I promise. I've got payments coming in. This is just a timing issue. $9,000. On top of the 20 I'd never seen. On top of everything he'd taken from my mother. Why would I give you anything? I asked, my voice cold. Because you're better than this, he said smoothly. Because holding grudges doesn't bring your mother back. Because deep down, you know she'd want us to move forward. She'd want her family to support each other. There it was again. Using my mother's memory as leverage. Using guilt as currency. I should have hung up. Should have blocked his number. Should have let his wedding fall apart. But grief makes you weak. And anger makes you stupid.
Fine, I said.
Send me the vendor information. I'll handle it. You're amazing, Evelyn. Truly. You'll be my guest of honor at the wedding. Front row seat. Guest of honor. The phrase made me want to vomit. I transferred the money the next day. Watched $9,000 disappear from my account into the hands of caterers and musicians and wine distributors. All for a wedding that celebrated my mother's replacement. Marcus called me an idiot when I told him. Why would you do that? Because I want to be there, I said. I want to see it. All of it. I want to watch him celebrate with money he stole. I want evidence. Evidence of what? That he's a fraud. That he's been lying about everything. That Camille's involved. Marcus was quiet for a moment. You're playing a dangerous game. He started it. I'm just finishing it. The week before the wedding, I did more digging. Called vendors Gregory's company had worked with. Asked about payment histories. Late payments. Bounced checks. Angry contractors who'd filed complaints. The pattern was clear. Gregory's business had been hemorrhaging money for years. I found something else too. Camille's name on expense reports that didn't make sense. Dinners for two charged to company accounts. Hotel stays during supposed business trips. Dates that went back 3 years. 3 years before my mother died. They'd been together while my mother was alive. While she was refinancing her house to support his company. While she was trusting him. I printed everything. Made copies. Organized it into folders. And then I got dressed for a wedding. The Grand Bellevue Hotel looked like something from a magazine. White roses everywhere. String lights. Marble floors polished to a mirror shine. I walked through those doors in a black dress, not because I was mourning, but because I was hunting. Gregory spotted me during cocktail hour. Evelyn, you made it. He hugged me like we were family, like he hadn't bled us dry. Wouldn't miss it, I said, smiling. Where's the bride? Camille's getting final touches done. You'll love her. She's incredible. Incredible.
Sure.
incredibly good at helping him steal. I found my seat at table 6. Not the guest of honor table. Not even close to the front. I'd been relegated to the middle, surrounded by people I didn't know. People who worked for Gregory's company. People who probably had no idea they were celebrating a fraud. The ceremony was quick. Traditional vows. Camille wore white, which felt like a joke. Gregory cried, which felt like a performance. And when the officiant said, "You may kiss the bride," I looked away. Dinner started at 7. Course after course of expensive food that I couldn't taste. Wine I didn't drink. Conversations I didn't join. I just sat there, watching Gregory work the room, watching Camille smile and accept congratulations, watching the $9,000 I'd paid for turn into their perfect night. And then came the toast. Gregory stood,
Raised his glass.
and destroyed whatever tiny piece of restraint I had left. The newspaper had been small, tucked into the lifestyle section like it didn't matter. Like my mother's entire existence could be erased with one engagement announcement. I'd been sitting at my desk, coffee going cold, contract proposals spread across my workspace, when my assistant Jenna dropped the paper in front of me. "Have you seen this?" she asked, her voice careful. I looked down. Gregory's face smiled up at me. Professional photo, arm around a woman with perfect hair and a practiced smile. Camille Donahue. The announcement talked about their love story, their shared passion for construction and design, their plans for a private ceremony. Not one mention of my mother. Not one acknowledgement that he'd been married before. Just him and Camille, starting fresh, rewriting history. I'd thrown up in the office bathroom after reading it. Jenna held my hair back and didn't ask questions. That was 3 weeks ago. 3 weeks of spiraling thoughts, sleepless nights, and a growing rage that felt like it might consume me. I'd spent those weeks investigating, calling in favors, following paper trails that Gregory thought he'd covered. The government contract he'd used to justify borrowing from me? I found the bid documents. His company had been rejected.
Twice.
The contract had gone to a competitor 8 months before he'd asked me for money. The expansion plans he'd sold my mother on? The permits had never been filed. The properties he claimed to be developing didn't exist. Gregory Hart's entire business was smoke and mirrors. And Camille had been his assistant through all of it. She'd signed off on expense reports. She'd witnessed contracts. She'd been there for every lie. I was sitting in Marcus's office reviewing all of this when Gregory called about the catering. "It's almost funny," Marcus said after I hung up. "He actually thinks you're going to help him." "I am helping him," I said, signing the check. "I'm helping him hang himself." The check cleared on a Tuesday. By Wednesday, I had confirmation from all the vendors. Food ordered. Wine delivered. Band booked. Everything Gregory wanted for his perfect wedding, paid for with money he'd never pay back. I spent the next week preparing. Bought the black dress. Got my hair done. Practiced my calm face in the mirror. Because I knew what was coming. I knew that when Gregory stood up to give his toast, when he thanked everyone but my mother, I was going to break. The question was whether I'd break quietly or make it spectacular. The morning of the wedding, I woke up at 5 a.m.
Couldn't sleep.
Kept thinking about my mother. About the way she'd defended him. About the stress lines that had appeared on her face in those last months. About the hospital bed where she died while Gregory was probably with Camille. I arrived at the Grand Bellevue at 6 p.m. Early enough to watch the setup. The florist arranging white roses that probably cost more per stem than most people made in an hour. The catering staff I'd paid for, setting up stations of caviar and champagne.
The band doing sound checks.
"Miss Hart." A coordinator approached with a clipboard. "We have you at table 6. Not table 1. Not the family table. Table 6. In the middle of the room. Like I was just another guest." "Perfect," I said, smiling. I watched the guests arrive. Gregory's business associates. Camille's friends. People who didn't know my mother had existed. People who looked at this wedding and saw success and love and happily ever after. They had no idea they were celebrating with stolen money. Gregory found me during cocktail hour. He looked good. Too good. Like he'd spent my money on a spa day and a personal trainer. "Evelyn," He pulled me into a hug that felt like a performance.
Thank you. Seriously.
You saved us. I won't forget this. I'm sure you won't, I said, keeping my voice light. And I promise, first thing after the honeymoon, I'll get you that money back. Every penny. With interest. Lies rolled off his tongue like water.
Smooth. Practiced.
Believable. Camille appeared beside him, her dress probably worth more than my car. You must be Evelyn. Gregory's told me so much about you. I bet he had. Probably left out the part where he'd stolen from my family. Congratulations, I managed. Beautiful ceremony. Thank you. And thank you for helping with the catering. Gregory said you really came through. She touched his arm, possessive. We're so grateful. Grateful. They were grateful. For my money. For my mother's house. For everything they'd taken. I excused myself before I said something I couldn't take back. Found my seat at table 6.
Sat down.
Waited. The ceremony had been outside, sunset timing, magazine perfect. Now dinner was starting. Courses arrived one after another. Appetizers I'd paid for. Wine I'd purchased. Entrees I'd funded. Every bite was a reminder of what he'd taken. The couple at my table tried to make conversation. How do you know Gregory? The woman asked. Family, I said shortly. Oh, how nice. Camille's such a lovely woman. They're perfect together.
Perfect. Sure.
Perfect liars. Perfect thieves. Perfect couple. I pushed food around my plate and watched Gregory. He was in his element. Shaking hands. Accepting congratulations. Playing the successful businessman. The loving husband. The man who'd earned all of this. Except he hadn't earned anything. He'd stolen it. From my mother.
From me.
From probably dozens of other people. And now he was going to toast his accomplice. The clinking of glass on glass signaled the speeches. Best man went first, told some boring story about Gregory's college days. Maid of honor gushed about Camille's kindness. Everyone laughed at the right moments, applauded at the right times. Then Gregory stood. My hands gripped the tablecloth. My heart rate spiked. This was it. Tonight, he began, and I felt my jaw clench. I stand here a better man. The room leaned in. Everyone loved a good wedding speech. Everyone wanted to hear about love and growth and partnership. But not me. I wanted to hear what he'd say about my mother. How he'd acknowledge her. How he'd explain marrying someone else less than a year after her death. I owe that to 2 incredible women, he continued. 2 women. Okay. One had to be my mother. One had to be. But Gregory turned to Camille. Only to Camille. And when he raised his glass higher and smiled, I knew he wasn't going to mention my mother at all. And to you, my partner, my confidant, my work wife for all those years. Work wife. The room thought it was cute. I thought I might throw up. You were by my side when the world was against me. When my mother was dying, I thought. When he was stealing from us. When he was lying to everyone. Here's to finally making it official. Finally. Like he'd been waiting. Like my mother had been the obstacle. Like her death was convenient. The applause started. Glasses clinked. And my fork hit my plate with a crack that echoed through my skull. People turned. Gregory's smile faltered. And I stood up, my chair scraping loud enough to stop the string quartet. Everything I'd planned to stay calm about went out the window. Because I looked at him, at his smug face and his expensive suit and his toast to the woman he'd probably been with while my mother was alive, and I couldn't stay quiet anymore. Not for one more second. The silence after my fork hit the plate was thick enough to choke on. 200 pairs of eyes, all locked on me. All waiting to see what the woman in black was going to do. Gregory's smile froze on his face like someone had hit pause. Camille's hand went to her throat, her champagne glass suspended halfway to her lips. I stood slowly, deliberately. Every second stretched like taffy. Interesting toast, I said, and my voice cut through the quiet like a knife through silk. Especially since the first, Mrs. Hart died believing you were faithful. The gasps came in waves. Someone near the bar dropped their glass. The sound of crystal shattering felt appropriate. Gregory's face went from frozen smile to pale shock. Evelyn, he started, his voice dropping into that familiar patronizing tone. Kiddo, this isn't the time or place. Don't call me kiddo, I snapped. And this is exactly the time and place. I walked toward the head table, my heels clicking against marble. Each step felt like power returning to my body, like justice finding its feet. You all think this is a beautiful wedding, I said, addressing the room now. You think this is a love story. Two people finding each other, building a life together. It's romantic, right? Confused murmurs rippled through the guests. Camille stood up, her face going red. Who do you think you? I think I'm the stepdaughter who just paid for this entire dinner, I said, turning to her. All $9,000 of it. The caviar you're eating?
Mine.
The champagne you're drinking?
Mine.
The band that's been playing your fairy tale soundtrack? Also mine. More gasps. Louder this time. People looked at Gregory, who'd gone from pale to red. That's not true, he said, but his voice cracked. Evelyn's upset. She's grieving. She doesn't know what she's saying. I know exactly what I'm saying. I pulled out my phone, pulled up my banking app, turned it toward the crowd. Here's the wire transfer. Dated 2 weeks ago. $9,000 to Grand Bellevue Catering Services. Want to see the confirmation email where Gregory asked me to handle it? I've got that too. A man at table 3 stood up. Gregory, is this true? Gregory's jaw clenched. It's a misunderstanding. Family business. Nothing to do with. Family business, I repeated, laughing without humor. Is that what you call stealing from my mother? Is that what you call taking a $20,000 loan you never paid back? Is that what you call refinancing her house to fund your failing company? The room exploded into whispers. Camille grabbed Gregory's arm. What is she talking about? Nothing, Gregory said quickly. She's making things up. She's been unstable since her mother died. Unstable, I said, my voice rising. I'm unstable because I'm calling out a con artist? Because I'm telling the truth about the man who bled my family dry. I turned back to the crowd. You want to know who Gregory Hart really is? He's the man who convinced my mother to refinance the house my father built. The house that was supposed to be her security. He told her it was for business expansion, for government contracts, for their future. People were standing now, moving closer, phones coming out. Those contracts never existed. I continued. I checked. The company rejected his bids 8 months before he took my mother's money. The expansion properties? Never filed for permits. His entire business is built on borrowed money he has no intention of paying back. That's slander, Gregory said, his voice shaking. I'll sue you for. Sue me? I laughed. Please do. Because my lawyer has every document, every receipt, every lie you've told documented and ready to file. I was going to wait until after your honeymoon, be civil about it. But then you stood up here and toasted your work wife while erasing my mother from existence. Camille's face had gone white. Gregory, what is she talking about? What documents? Don't listen to her, Gregory said, grabbing Camille's hand. She's bitter. She's angry. She's trying to ruin our night because she can't handle that I've moved on. Moved on? My voice cracked. My mother died 11 months ago. 11 months. And you're already remarried. To the woman whose name appears on expense reports dating back 3 years. Hotel stays. Dinners for 2. Business trips that weren't business. Camille pulled her hand away from Gregory. What? I have the receipts, I said, looking directly at her. Every charge your name's attached to. Every trip you took together, while my mother was alive. While she was trusting him. While she was dying from the stress of debt he'd buried her in. The room had gone completely silent. No whispers now. Just shock. Gregory's face twisted. You have no right. I have every right, I shot back. You made it my right when you stole from my family. When you used my mother's love as a weapon. When you called me 2 weeks ago begging for catering money, promising you'd pay me back, knowing damn well you wouldn't. I turned to leave, then stopped. One more thing. One more truth. Oh, and Camille? I said, looking at the bride in her expensive white dress. You might want to check those company accounts. Because the investigation starts Monday.
Fraud.
Tax evasion. Falsified documents. All of it. Every lie he told. Every dollar he stole. Every contract he faked. Gregory lunged forward. You can't. I already did, I said calmly. My lawyer filed the complaint yesterday. The authorities have everything. Bank statements. Invoices. Emails with your signature on them, Camille. Both of you. Camille's champagne glass slipped from her hand, shattering on the floor.
No.
No, Gregory said everything was legal. He said. He lied, I said simply. About the contracts. About the money. About my mother. About all of it. And you helped him. Whether you knew it or not, your name's all over his crimes. I picked up my clutch, smoothed my dress, and looked at Gregory one last time.
He looks smaller now.
Deflated. The confident businessman gone, replaced by a panicked man watching his world collapse. Enjoy your wedding night, I said. It's the last good one you're going to have for a very long time. Then I walked out. Through the brass doors. Into the cool night air. Behind me, I could hear chaos erupting. Voices raised. Arguments starting. The perfect wedding dissolving into exactly what it had always been underneath. A lie built on stolen money and broken promises. My phone buzzed. Marcus. Did you do it? Just lit the match, I typed back. Let it burn. I got in my car, turned on the engine, and drove away from the Grand Bellevue Hotel. In my rearview mirror, I could see guests streaming out of the building, phones pressed to ears, faces shocked. Gregory Hart's empire was about to fall, and I was going to watch every second of it crumble. Because some debts, they don't need collecting. Life takes care of them for you.
The phone started ringing before I even got home. Marcus first, then my assistant Jenna, then numbers I didn't recognize. I ignored them all, let the world spin without me for one night. I'd done what I came to do. I poured myself a glass of wine, sat on my balcony, and watched the city lights flicker like distant stars. My hands were shaking, not from fear, from relief. Like I'd been holding my breath for 11 months and finally let it out. The next morning, Marcus showed up at my door with coffee and a folder thick enough to be a novel. You made the news, he said, pushing past me into the apartment. Local gossip blogs picked it up. Wedding crasher exposes groom's financial fraud. It's everywhere. I took the coffee. Good. Good. Marcus stared at me. Evelyn, you just declared war on a man who's proven he'll do anything to protect himself. You sure you're ready for what comes next? I was ready. I'd been ready since the moment my mother died and Gregory showed up at her funeral with dry eyes and empty promises. What's in the folder? I asked. Marcus spread papers across my dining table. Bank statements, tax returns, construction contracts with Gregory's signature. But there was something else. Something I hadn't seen before. That whistleblower you mentioned? Marcus tapped the document. Turns out it was one of Gregory's accountants. Guy quit 2 months ago. Took copies of everything. He's willing to testify that Gregory knowingly submitted false invoices to clients, inflated project costs, and pocketed the difference. My heart rate picked up. How much are we talking? Conservative estimate? $300,000 over 5 years. $300,000. My $20,000 was pocket change compared to what he'd been stealing. And Camille? I asked. Marcus pulled out another stack. Her name's on 70% of the fraudulent expense reports. Company credit card charges for personal expenses. Hotels, restaurants, shopping. All billed as business costs. I studied the dates. Some went back 4 years. For years of Gregory and Camille spending company money while my mother was alive, while she was mortgaging her house to keep his business afloat. She had to know. I said quietly, maybe not. But ignorance isn't a defense when your signature's on the documents. Over the next week, things moved fast. The State Fraud Division opened an investigation. Gregory's business partners started calling lawyers. Clients who'd paid for projects that were never completed began filing complaints. And Camille? She hired her own attorney and filed for annulment 3 days after the wedding. I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. But then I remembered her hand on Gregory's arm, her grateful smile when she thanked me for funding their celebration, her willingness to step into my mother's life without asking questions. Sometimes you're a victim. Sometimes you're an accomplice. Camille had been both. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. I almost ignored it, but something made me answer. Evelyn. Gregory's voice, rough like he hadn't slept. We need to talk. We really don't. Please, just 5 minutes. I can explain everything. The business, the money, your mother. It's not what you think. I laughed. Couldn't help it. It's exactly what I think. You're a con artist, Gregory. And you got caught. I made mistakes, he said, and his voice cracked. I know that, but I loved your mother. I really did. And I never meant for things to get this bad. The business was supposed to work. The contracts were supposed to come through. I was trying to build something. You built a house of cards, I said, and now it's falling. I'll pay you back. Every penny. Just drop the investigation. Please. If this goes forward, I lose everything. You already lost everything, I said. The day you decided my mother's love was worth less than your ego. I hung up, blocked his number, and went back to the documents Marcus had left. Because this wasn't just about money anymore. This was about every person Gregory had lied to, every client he'd cheated, every employee who trusted him. This was about justice. The investigation took 3 weeks to gather enough evidence for charges. Fraud, tax evasion, falsification of business records. The list went on. Gregory's lawyer tried to negotiate, offered restitution, suggested community service. The prosecutor wasn't interested. Mr. Hart's crimes show a pattern of deliberate deception spanning multiple years, she told me during a meeting. This is a mistake. It's a business model. Gregory's assets were frozen while the case moved forward. His house, his cars, his bank accounts, everything locked down. He couldn't pay his legal fees. Couldn't make bail when they arrested him. Couldn't run. I was home when Marcus called with the news. They charged him. All counts. Trial set for next spring. I closed my eyes and thought about my mother, about the stress lines on her face, about the way she defended him until the end. Good, I whispered, but it wasn't over, because the investigation had uncovered something else, something that made my blood run cold when Marcus showed me the documents. Insurance fraud. Gregory had taken out a life insurance policy on my mother 6 months before she died. $500,000, with himself as the sole beneficiary. Could be coincidence, Marcus said carefully. People take out policies all the time. But we both knew it wasn't coincidence. We both knew what it meant. Gregory hadn't just stolen from my mother while she was alive. He'd bet on her death. And when she died from the stress he'd caused, from the debt he'd buried her in, from the lies that had crushed her heart, he'd collected. I sat in Marcus's office, staring at the policy documents, and felt something cold settle in my chest. Can we prove it? I asked. Prove what? That he contributed to her death? That's hard. Medical causation is complicated. But the policy is legal, Marcus said quietly. Spouses take out policies on each other. It's normal. Nothing about this is normal. Marcus nodded. I know. But legally, there's nothing we can do about the insurance. The criminal charges are solid. That's where we focus. I left his office feeling hollow. Because yes, Gregory was facing prison. Yes, he'd lost everything. But he'd still profited from my mother's death. He'd still collected $500,000 while pretending to grieve. That money should have been hers. Should have been her security, her retirement, her peace. Instead, it had gone to the man who'd killed her. Maybe not with his hands, but with his greed. I walked to my car, got in, and sat there for a long time. The sun was setting, casting orange light across the parking lot. And I made a decision. Gregory Hart was going to pay for everything he'd done. Every lie, every theft, every betrayal. But most of all, he was going to pay for my mother. One way or another, I'd make sure of it. The news broke quietly at first, Local headlines, then footage of Gregory in handcuffs, his polished life unraveling. I watched it all from my couch, wine glass in hand, a strange satisfaction curling through me as his empire crumbled. Within days, the story spread, business journals, blogs, former employees exposing unpaid wages and broken promises. Gregory's web of deceit stretched back years, a decade of manipulation I'd finally torn apart. Then came the call. "Miss Hart, this is Detective Chun. We like to talk about your mother's life insurance policy." My blood froze. At a downtown cafe, the detective slid a folder across to me. $500,000, she said. "Taken out 6 months before your mother's death." She explained the payout had been fast. Too fast. Almost like he knew exactly what to do. Chun suspected Gregory's cons went further. "Men like him perfect a pattern," she said. "Your mother might not have been his first victim." That thought gutted me. After she left, I called Marcus. Find his marriage records. I told him. When he returned 2 days later, his expression said everything. 3 marriages before your mother," he said grimly. 2 wives dead, 1 car accident, 1 heart attack. Both insured, both payouts to Gregory. The world tilted. 2 dead wives, both accidents. I stared at the documents, the pattern horrifyingly clear. Mary, insure. Wait, collect. He's a serial killer. I whispered. Marcus shook his head. Not legally, but morally? Absolutely. I contacted Detective Chin again. "This changes things," she said. She would reach out to the families. If they found a pattern, the charges could escalate. That night, I looked at my mother's photo, wife number 4, and swore she'd be the last. Over the next week, I helped Chin track the previous wives' families. The first, Janet, still alive, spoke of financial abuse and fear. "I ran before he could ruin me," she said. "I wish I'd warned the others." The second wife's sister recalled her disbelief. Zara, a careful driver, dying in a supposed speeding accident. "Gregory maintained her car," she added quietly. My stomach turned. The third wife's son was furious. "My mother was healthy," he said. Then suddenly a heart attack at 52. Gregory was with her, called 911 too late. Police said I was grieving. His words trembled with years of suppressed certainty. Chun compiled everything. The district attorney reviewed it. 3 wives, 2 dead, all insured. Not enough for murder, he said, but enough for fraud, conspiracy, maybe more. It wasn't justice, but it was a start. At the October hearing, Gregory looked like a ghost of himself. Cheap suit, hollow eyes. When he saw me, realization flickered. He knew I'd dug him up, that the mask was gone. The charges were read: fraud, tax evasion, conspiracy, each one slicing through his facade. His lawyer begged for a deal, but the prosecutor was firm. This goes to trial. Gregory's confidence shattered right there. His charm meant nothing. His empire deceit was dust. The truth had caught up. Outside, the press swarmed. "Miss Hart, how does it feel to see your stepfather facing justice?" one called out. I thought of my mother, Janet, Sarah, Linda, the women whose lives have been taken or ruined by one man's greed. "It feels like the beginning," I said into the cameras. Justice doesn't end in court. It ends when every victim story is told. When predators like Gregory Hart can't hide behind money and charm anymore. Then I walked away, leaving the reporters behind. Because this story wasn't about vengeance. It was about change. About exposing the quiet crimes that never make the front page. Financial abuse, manipulation, the kind that kills slowly and leaves no bruises. Gregory Hart had perfected his con over 10 years. Now, I would dedicate mine to making sure the world knew exactly how he'd done it, and that he'd never do it again. The trial date was set for March, 5 months away. 5 months of pretrial motions, discovery, witness preparation. 5 months of reliving every moment of Gregory's lies. Marcus warned me it would be brutal. Defense is going to attack your credibility. They'll say you're a scorned stepdaughter, that you're vindictive, that you wanted your mother's inheritance, and Gregory stood in the way. "Let them try," I said, but he was right. Gregory's defense team started their campaign immediately. leaked stories to friendly journalists, painted me as unstable, grief-stricken, unable to accept my mother's choices. Evelyn Hart has waged a personal vendetta against my client. Gregory's lawyer told reporters. She's weaponized the legal system to punish him for moving on with his life. I wanted to scream, wanted to hold up every document, every receipt, every lie and shove it in their faces. But Marcus held me back. They're baiting you, he said. Don't take it. Let the evidence speak. So I stayed quiet, went to work, focused on my design business, tried to pretend my life wasn't consumed by court dates and legal strategy. But at night, I dreamed about my mother, about the life insurance policy Gregory had taken out on her, about Sarah's car accident and Linda's heart attack, about all the ways he'd profited from death while pretending to mourn. Detective Chun called in December. We found something. Gregory's third wife, Linda, her death was investigated after all. Medical examiner noted unusual circumstances, elevated potassium levels in her blood work. What does that mean? Could be natural, could be introduced. Potassium's hard to detect if you're not looking for it. And in a woman with no history of heart problems, sudden cardiac arrest made people ask questions. But they didn't investigate. Gregory was convincing. Grief-stricken husband. No motive. And the elevated potassium could have been from any number of natural causes. They let it go. I felt sick. You think he killed her? I think we should exhume the body and do a proper toxicology screen. If we find evidence of poisoning, that's murder. Linda's son agreed to the exhumation immediately. I've been waiting years for someone to take this seriously, he said. The exhumation happened in January. Cold gray morning, small cemetery outside the city. I wasn't there, but Detective Chin called me afterward. Preliminary results show suspicious levels of potassium chloride. More tests needed, but it's looking like homicide. Homicide. The word hung in the air like smoke. Gregory poisoned her? Possibly. We're bringing in specialists. If we can prove it, the DA will add murder charges. I sat down hard. All this time, I thought Gregory was just a con artist, a thief, a man who exploited women for money. But he was worse. So much worse. The news broke 3 weeks before the trial. Local man facing fraud charges now suspected in wife's murder. The media frenzy intensified. Camera crews camped outside Gregory's holding facility. Reporters dug into his past, interviewed anyone who'd ever known him. Janet, his first wife, went public. I'm lucky to be alive. He told me once that life insurance was an investment in our future. I divorced him before he could collect. Sarah's sister gave an interview. My sister's death was no accident. I believed that for 7 years. Finally, someone's listening. And me? I stayed quiet. Let the family speak. Let the evidence build. Because this wasn't about revenge anymore. This was about stopping a predator. The trial started on a Monday in March. Cold rain outside, packed courtroom inside. Gregory sat at the defense table in an orange jumpsuit, no expensive suit this time. His hair had gone completely gray. His hands shook when he reached for his water glass. The prosecution laid out their case methodically. Financial fraud first, documents showing falsified invoices, testimony from the whistleblower accountant, bank statements proving Gregory had stolen hundreds of thousands from clients and employees. Then they moved to the insurance policies. 3 dead wives, 3 payouts, a pattern too obvious to ignore. The defendant, the prosecutor said, made a career out of marrying vulnerable women, taking out life insurance policies and waiting for them to die. Whether through stress, negligence, or outright murder, the result was the same. He profited from their deaths. Gregory's lawyer fought back. Correlation isn't causation. My client's wives died of natural or accidental causes. Tragic, yes, but not criminal. The state is trying to turn a series of unfortunate coincidences into a conspiracy theory. But then came the toxicology report on Linda. Potassium chloride, levels consistent with injection. Trace evidence of needle marks found during the new autopsy. Evidence that had been missed 7 years ago. The courtroom went silent as the medical examiner testified. In my professional opinion, Linda Hart's death was not natural. The levels of potassium chloride in her system are consistent with deliberate poisoning. I watched Gregory's face, watched the mask finally slip, watched fear replace arrogance. The defense tried to discredit the evidence. 7 years later, after the body's been decomposed and re-examined, the science is questionable at best. But the jury wasn't buying it. I could see it in their faces. They'd heard enough, seen enough, believed enough. The prosecution called me to the stand on day 6. I wore a simple black suit, kept my voice steady, told the truth. My mother loved him, I said. She trusted him completely. And that trust killed her. Maybe not directly, but the stress he put her under, the debt he buried her in, the betrayal she never knew about, it broke her heart. Literally. Gregory's lawyer cross-examined me. Isn't it true you resented your stepfather? That you never approved of his marriage to your mother? I resented him stealing from us, I said calmly. I resented him lying to my mother. I resented him proposing to another woman 10 months after she died. But I didn't make up the evidence. The documents speak for themselves. The lawyer tried again. You paid for his wedding out of spite, didn't you? To humiliate him. I paid for his wedding because he asked me to, and I went because I wanted to see what kind of man celebrates with stolen money. Turns out, the kind who'd rather toast his accomplice than acknowledge his dead wife. The courtroom murmured. The judge called for order. Gregory's lawyer sat down. The trial lasted 3 weeks. Testimony from former employees, financial experts, insurance investigators, the families of Gregory's dead wives. Each piece of evidence stacking higher until the weight was undeniable. On the last day, the prosecutor gave closing arguments. Gregory Hart is a predator. He targets vulnerable women, gains their trust, exploits their resources, and profits from their deaths. Whether through fraud, manipulation, or murder, the pattern is clear, and the pattern must stop. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. When they came back, the verdict was unanimous. Guilty on all counts. I sat in that courtroom and watched Gregory Hart's face as the judge read each verdict. Guilty of fraud, guilty of tax evasion, guilty of insurance fraud, and guilty of second-degree murder in the death of Linda Hart. Sentencing was set for 30 days later. Maximum possible sentence, life in prison. I walked out of the courthouse into gray afternoon light. Reporters surrounded me, but I didn't stop. Just kept walking until I reached my car. The sentencing hearing was smaller than the trial. Just family, lawyers, and a handful of reporters. Gregory shuffled into the courtroom in chains, his orange jumpsuit hanging loose. He'd lost weight, lost hair, lost everything except the consequences he'd earned. The judge asked if anyone wanted to speak before sentencing. Linda's son stood first. My mother was 52 when she died, he said, his voice shaking. Healthy, active, planning her retirement. Then she married Gregory Hart, and 6 months later she was dead. I've spent 7 years knowing something was wrong, but being told I was paranoid. Now I know I was right. I just wish someone had listened sooner. Zara's sister spoke next, talked about the car accident that never made sense, the convenient life insurance payout, the way Gregory had cried at the funeral while already planning his next move. Then it was my turn. I walked to the front slowly, my prepared statement folded in my pocket. But when I reached the microphone, I didn't pull it out, just spoke from the heart. My mother died believing her husband loved her. That's what hurts most. Not the money he stole or the lies he told, but the fact that she never knew. She died trusting him, and he used that trust to destroy her. I looked at Gregory. He wouldn't meet my eyes. You didn't just steal money, I continued. You stole her peace, her security, her last years. And for what? A bigger house? A newer car? The illusion of success? My voice cracked. I hope it was worth it, because you'll spend the rest of your life in a cell thinking about the women you destroyed. And unlike them, you'll have plenty of time to regret it. I sat down. The judge nodded, reviewed her notes, and spoke. Mr. Hart, you've been convicted of multiple counts of fraud and 1 count of second-degree murder. Your crimes show a pattern of deliberate exploitation spanning over a decade. You targeted vulnerable women, gained their trust, and profited from their suffering and death. This court finds your actions reprehensible and deserving of the maximum penalty." She paused. The courtroom held its breath. "I hereby sentence you to life in prison without possibility of parole for the murder of Linda Hart. Additionally, 15 years for fraud charges to run consecutively. You'll be eligible for parole in 45 years. Gregory was 72 years old. 45 years meant he'd die in prison. The bailiffs led him away. He didn't look back, didn't say anything, just shuffled out of the courtroom like he was already a ghost. Outside, reporters asked how I felt. Relieved, I said simply. Justice took a long time, but it came. That night, I went to my mother's grave, brought flowers, sat in the grass even though it was cold. "We got him, Mom," I whispered. "He can't hurt anyone else now." The wind blew through the trees. Somewhere nearby, a bird called, and for the first time since my mother died, I felt something like peace. The next morning, Marcus called. "Gregory's assets are being liquidated. The court's ordering restitution to victims. You'll get your money back. All of it." I didn't care about the money anymore, but I said thank you anyway. "There's more," Marcus continued. "Several of Gregory's former clients are filing civil suits. His company's being dissolved, and the state's creating a task force to investigate similar cases. Your mother's case changed how they look at financial abuse. That mattered. That meant something. Over the following weeks, I started to rebuild, not just my life, but something bigger. I used the restitution money to start a foundation in my mother's name, the Hart Foundation for Financial Abuse Awareness. We provided resources for people trapped in exploitative relationships, legal advice, financial counseling, safe exit strategies. Your mother would be proud, Jenna said when we opened the office. She deserved better than what she got, I said. But maybe we can help other people get better. Janet, Gregory's first wife, called one day. "I saw what you're doing. The foundation. I'd like to help. If you'll have me, we'd love to have you." She joined as a counselor, helped other women recognize the warning signs she'd missed, turned her trauma into purpose. Linda's son started a scholarship fund for children who'd lost parents to domestic violence. Sarah's sister became an advocate for better death investigations. We were all survivors of Gregory Hart's destruction, and we were all choosing to build something better from the wreckage. 6 months after the sentencing, Detective Chun called. "Thought you'd want to know. Gregory's appealing conviction." My stomach dropped. "What are his chances?" "Minimal. The evidence was solid, but it'll drag things out another year or two." "Let him appeal," I said. "He's already in prison, already paying. The appeal won't change that." And it didn't. The appeal was denied 8 months later. Gregory Hart's conviction stood. I learned about it while working at the foundation office, put down my phone and smiled. Not because I was happy he was suffering, but because I knew he couldn't hurt anyone else. That evening, I drove to the lake house, my mother's house, the one Gregory had refinanced, the one I'd managed to buy back with the restitution money. I stood on the dock, watching the sun set over the water, and thought about everything that had happened. The wedding, the investigation, the trial, the justice that had taken so long to arrive. Some debts don't need collecting. I whispered to the wind. Life takes care of them for you. Behind me, the house lights came on, warm and welcoming, the way my mother had always kept them. I'd filled the rooms with photos, her at the lake, her laughing at charity galas, her living the life she deserved. Gregory was gone from our lives now, truly gone, and in his absence, I was building something he could never touch. Legacy, purpose, truth. The foundation helped 20 families in the first year, 50 in the second. By year 3, we expanded to 3 cities and hired a full staff. People asked if I'd ever forgive Gregory. The answer was simple. No, forgiveness wasn't required for peace. Understanding his sickness didn't mean excusing it, and moving forward didn't mean forgetting what he'd done. I carried my mother's memory like armor, wore the truth like a weapon, and built a life that honored her in ways Gregory's lies never could. Sometimes, late at night, I thought about him in that prison cell, wondered if he felt remorse, if he understood what he'd destroyed. Probably not. Men like Gregory Hart rarely do. But it didn't matter, because I'd taken his power, exposed his lies, gave voice to his victims, and I'd turned my grief into something that actually helped people. That was revenge enough. A year after Gregory's sentencing, I opened a second office for the foundation, this one in my mother's hometown. The ribbon cutting overflowed with survivors, families, and faces forever changed by financial abuse. Janet, Sarah's sister, Linda's son, all of us bound by the same predator, now standing together to stop others like him. My mother believed in second chances, I said to crowd. Gregory proved her wrong. But her faith in goodness wasn't wasted. It's our job to make it wiser. Cameras flashed as I cut the ribbon. Sunlight warm on my shoulders, like her presence blessing the moment. The foundation flourished. We built hotlines for victims, trained law enforcement, published guides, and created databases to detect suspicious insurance claims. Detective Chin joined our board. Your mother's case changed how I work, she said. Now I question what others call coincidence. Marcus smiled. You're making it harder for the next Gregory Hart. That's the idea, I told him. My design business grew too. Focus on honest, small businesses. Every Thanksgiving, I hosted dinners for survivors and volunteers. Simple meals, full tables, real family. 2 years later, a letter arrived from prison. Gregory's handwriting. I almost threw it out. Curiosity won. Evelyn, it began. I know I don't deserve forgiveness. I'm sorry, not for being caught, but for destroying what was good. Your mother was better than I deserved. I hope the foundation helps people. I read it twice. No manipulation, just emptiness. Maybe he meant it. Maybe not. I burned it anyway. His regret couldn't undo the pain. But the change we built, that was permanent. 3 years after everything, I spoke at a national conference. My stepfather's real crime wasn't theft, I said to 500 officials. It was betrayal. He made us believe he cared. That's what financial abusers do. They weaponize trust. I showed slides. Falsified contracts, insurance policies, my mother's refinance house. Financial abuse kills, I told them, not instantly, but by eroding hope until the body gives out. The silence was heavy. Then came a standing ovation. Afterward, survivors shared their stories. Echoes of mine, different names, same wounds. I listened, connected them with resources, turned pain into action. That night, I told Jenna, we need to expand again. She sighed. You can't save everyone. Maybe not, I said, but saving someone is enough. 6 months later, our 5th office opened. We launched a book, a podcast, a movement. My mother's death had created ripples. Now, they were waves. For years after Gregory's sentencing, I got the call. He died in prison, heart attack, age 76. No one claimed the body. Chen's voice was soft. It's over. I felt nothing. No relief, no satisfaction. Just the hollow quiet of closure. Gregory was gone, but the damage he'd done lived on. Justice had been served, but healing had never depended on him. Healing was the work. The survivors who escaped because of our hotline. The advisors who caught scams because of our training. Every life changed. That was justice in motion. I didn't attend his burial. I kept working. 5 years after that disastrous wedding, I stood in my lake house. Photos everywhere. My mother smiling. The foundation's first office. Survivors free. I'd rebuilt everything on truth, not revenge. The doorbell rang, Janet, with coffee and pastries. Thought you might want company. We sat on the dock, morning sun sparkling on the water. Do you think about him? She asked. Sometimes. I said, but less now. The foundation drowns him out. Janet nodded. Good. Our healing matters more than his memory. We sat quietly, 2 survivors breathing peace where pain once lived. Gregory had taken so much, but not everything. Not my mother's legacy. Not our strength. Not the community we'd built from his destruction. Some debts don't need collecting. I'd said once, life takes care of them. I'd been partly wrong. Life doesn't collect debts. People do, by fighting, speaking, rebuilding. Gregory bet we'd stay silent, that his charm would protect him. He lost that bet spectacularly, because his downfall created something unstoppable, a network of survivors, a foundation of truth, a movement to protect others. That was justice. Not punishment, but prevention. I stood, stretched. Come on, board meeting in an hour. 3 new cases. Janet laughed. Always working. Always building. I corrected. We walked back toward the house. Shadows stretching over the lake my mother loved. Inside, my phone buzzed. Messages from across the country. A woman seeking help. A prosecutor needing data. A journalist covering survivor stories. The work never stopped. Neither did the hope. I looked at my mother's photo and whispered, "We did it, Mom." We turned his lies into truth, his destruction into creation, his legacy into ours. And for the first time, I felt real peace. Gregory Hart was gone, but the good forged from his evil would last forever. That was the real revenge. Not his punishment, but our purpose. Not his death, but our life. Not his ending, but our beginning. If you've made it this far, thank you for listening. To my mother's story, to mine, to every survivor's. We're not victims. We're fighters. If you're trapped, scared, or unsure, reach out. Speak up. You're not alone. Because some debts don't get collected by life. They get collected by us through truth, justice, and action. That's how we honor the lost. Protect the living. That's how we win. Subscribe for more stories of strength and survival. Turn on notifications. Share your story, and remember, your voice matters. Your story matters. You matter. Until next time, stay strong, stay vigilant, and never stop fighting for what's right. This is Evelyn Hart, signing off.